Hello, my name's Chris Davis, and welcome to Model Office's 30th episode in our Science of Compliance podcast series, where we're showcasing that governance, risk, and compliance doesn't need to be as painful as completing a tax return, but can support sustainable and professional practice. In this episode, we are delighted to host Chris Reid, Managing Director and founder of Jigsaw Tree, an operational efficiency consultancy, to discuss her career journey and opportunities and challenges planner firms and advisor firms and wealth management businesses and their clients face in meeting ongoing market challenges and regulatory requirements. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Good to see you.
And you.
Good to see you. We've got two Chris's on this one, so it's going to be an interesting podcast.
We won't forget our names, will we? And I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. It's been a long time coming, this one, Chris. I have to say, it's been a long time coming. So, what we want to do on these sessions is really get to know our guests as well as possible, and for our listeners and viewers to get to know them. So it'd be great if you could just paint a picture of your background in the sector that we all work, and what shaped you as an individual and your journey and to where you are today. So just a good view of your journey through your career. That'd be great.
Brilliant. A bit of a potted history. So it started back in, I guess, 1995 after I had my eldest and was looking for a job, I guess, and found a role in financial services working for an employee benefits business called Cox Hepburn, who are no longer around in that shape today. And I worked with them for a couple of years. And then there was somebody doing something called the virtual network, a guy called Nick Bewley. And he talked about connected technology even back then. And he had sort of a scanning software and compliance software and front and back office. And I thought that looks really interesting. So I went to one of his seminars and then I applied for a role with him. And I thought, I could go down this regulated route or I could go down the tech space. And I just found the tech space really exciting. So I thought, no, that's going to be where I'm going to go. So I tapped him up for a job and worked with them for a couple of years and then got to know First and went and worked with Mick, Rory and John for 12 and a half years
Right.
in a variety of roles. I sort of finished my time with them as head of client engagement, where the business had been sold and migrated on and has sort of, in my view, um, lost my heart in the business. And I
Yeah.
just thought there is an opportunity to really help firms transform their businesses and change the way that they use the technology. And hence I created Jigsaw Tree in 2012. So that's
Right.
a bit of a potted history to the incorporation of the business. And now we're a team of 20 people, three core areas: outsourced income reconciliation, projects and training, and consultancy. So we help firms with that tech transformation in all aspects of their business.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's very clear and impressive. I mean, I didn't know you'd been around since 2012 actually as Jigsaw Tree. I thought you well when I first met you, we were at a the Festival of Financial Planning it was. I
Yes.
remember, which is way back now, 2017, 18, I can't remember when that was. And that's we were just beginning. We don't know our first beta version of Model Office back then. And I remember meeting you and being impressed with what you're up to, as in the process mapping and all that stuff, the good work that you do. What would you say? I mean, being a woman in retail financial services, really interested in your because I know you're highly engaged in the initiatives in promoting women in the industry. So I'd be really interested in understand a bit more about your career challenges you've faced and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, I think there's always challenge when you create a business, and I think a number of those surround people. Um, I think going into businesses and helping them transform their business is always a challenge,
Hmm.
particularly when you have to be, and I always believe in being 100% transparent about, where we see the business, and we will always present the facts back. And sometimes that has challenges because firms don't necessarily want to put their head above the parapet about how, challenging their technology may be or the way that they've used the tech in the past. Um, so I think setting up a new business was a bit of a um, I would say the word challenge again, but it was there was very lots of unknown about where the
Mm.
business would go to. It was just me to start off with, and then began to see the shape changing until here we are today. But and again, AI is coming into our sector fast and furious, and that causes, I think, a bit of decision fatigue at the moment. I think there's a lot of chaos around it. And of course, we've thrown our hat into the ring to say we've built this digital agent to support that income reconciliation process because we think it's important to be able to make some of the processes more efficient and automate them where possible.
Yeah, really, really interesting, and I'll come on to that in a minute for you because I think that's obviously we're in AI RegTech, so and we're also now in the AI lab with the FCA on their
Brilliant.
supercharged academy they're calling it, which is interesting, but really interesting insights there. Like you say, lots of confusion at the moment, lots of white noise, and decision fatigue is a very good phrase actually. That's definitely where a lot of firms are. Um, just on the women in the industry initiative that you're involved in. Could you just explore a bit more about that and how that is shaping up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tessa from Money Info and I had a conversation,
Yep.
and clearly there's a low number of women, I think about 20% in our sector. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be good to do something that was away from London, was in the Midlands, where we could bring women together, where they could network together, but learn from one another. So we've got them mapped out for the rest of the year. So our next one is in April. So I've got an ex CEO of a charity coming in to talk about Capler House, which is leadership styles, which will be really insightful. And then we've got a panel of four women in their 20s, which has been led by Naya, who works for Jigsaw Tree, who's in her 20s. So, well,
Right.
why financial services? What brought you into our sector? What do you love about it? And how can we help drive the shape of this sector? And then in July, we're going to be powered by the PFS. So we aim to have 150 women together, and we've shaped that agenda to make it really impactful to the people that are going to be attending.
Brilliant. And for anybody who doesn't know about that, any women out there who are listening and watching, how can they find you? What's it called? What is it got a website or
So it's called Women in Finance Collective.
right?
Um, they can email hello@jigsawtree.com, and we'll provide them with some details. We've got them all scheduled until the end of the year, so
Yeah.
we do one a quarter. And the feedback we've had is so positive about not just bringing people together to say this is network session, it's to say, well, how can we give something back? So how can we talk to them about their leadership styles? How can we encourage them to gain traction and a journey and a pathway through financial services that really suits them?
Brilliant. Really, really great. Well done. Great initiative. So going back to really Jigsaw Tree and looking at what you're doing regarding building in response to market change and economic challenges and client needs. You touched on this. Is it a bot that you've built
Yeah.
or something like that? It'd be helpful to understand a bit more about that and also where you're helping firms in particular around the AI space, I think would be great.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to my previous point about, decision fatigue. And so what we've been doing is we've been working with firms to help them implement AI. And we're really clear in terms of where some of those efficiency gains are being achieved and perhaps where they're not being achieved to say, well, actually, if some things are a no-brainer, like implementing the meeting transcription, the actionable
Mm.
insights, the fact find updating, all of those things can improve accuracy. And even the most skeptical of advisors, we've had conversations with them to say, my goodness, it saved me 90 minutes. It recorded the meeting so clearly that I was able to focus on the client and it captured all of the actions. In fact, one of them I would have missed.
Right.
So, we can see from that perspective that it's doing a great job. I
Mm.
think other areas, a bit more tricky. When I go to see my financial advisor, we talk holistically.
Mm.
And so we can see that it can do simplified suitability, but it can't do the more complex suitability. The compliance stuff that you do, Chris, absolutely brilliant in terms of, removing perhaps for some businesses that single point of failure, that
Yeah.
specialist, because actually your tech does that heavy lifting for them. So I think anything that supports that, with for admin and re-LOA to do that LOA process. And then of course we're seeing those AI technologies all getting into each other's space, and therefore it's an interesting sort of woven journey to say, okay, so where are they going to get to with it? And then
Mm.
we're seeing the likes of Pilot and perhaps others like Ningy that have AI built within their platform. Um, so it's a really interesting space. And what we're saying to firms is, look, let us help you identify the problem. And once we've identified the problem you're looking to solve, let's make sure we get best fit technology that
Mm.
supports that problem statement that you've got, and also ensure that it's well integrated with your current tech stack.
Great. And I mean, obviously, as a founder and fellow founders, what would you say that your vision and mission is for Jigsaw Tree in the financial services sector, and how you're operating and helping your customers and clients?
So I think I would describe as we try and punch above our weight. So you can see we've got B Corp, it's B Corp month.
Yep.
And for me, we'd had ISO previously, and it became a bit of a tick box exercise. And I wanted something that was going to challenge our business to be a better business and do better business. And I think B Corp really helps you to do that and to make sure that actually it's a clear stamp as to this is what we're all about. I think the challenge with B Corp is they've re-engineered the certification and they've made it very, very different.
Mm.
So again, we are bringing everybody into that B Corp journey to make sure that that is woven through the fabric of our business.
And for anyone new to B Corp, can you just explain a bit about how it works, what it is, what's the standards, and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, the standards are really high. I mean, it looks at all aspects of your business and it talks about, where you buy things from and, what you're doing to help the community in which you work. How do you look after your team to make sure that you treat people in your business fairly? So it looks at, the way that you operate that business. So, we've certainly had to look at our values, our staff, the where we buy stuff from, how we're engaging with sort of volunteering. So we support Children's Acorns Hospice. So we're walking 100 miles in March. We've got someone doing a
Right.
half marathon next month. We've got other people doing a swimathon. So again, it's bringing people together. And of course, we run a completely virtual business. So I have people from the tip of Scotland down to sort of the East Coast. And so that brings its own challenges. So when you do sort of virtual activities, everybody's sharing on Strava, and then we've
Mm.
got a leaderboard. And so all of those things work really well to say, look, these are all the aspects that we're doing, but it's a really detailed certification that you have to go through. I mean, it really touches on every single part of your business.
Yeah, what I like about that is, I mean, we're ISO 27001, which is just very focused, as you know, on processes and obviously it's a data-driven business. It's important to have that from that side of it. But what I like about the B Corp, that what we've seen is it's far more cultural,
Yes.
and looking at all those key kind of like behavioral principles in the business, which is really important because being a compliance business and a compliance podcast, I suppose we've got to touch on that. But you've got the non-financial misconduct rules coming through in September, which is a big one for the sector because that is really, at the moment that's just focused on the banking um, community, and now it's going across everybody, and that's obviously very behavioural, and all that misconduct that can go with that, and that's inside and outside the workplace as well, which is interesting. So there we go. That's one to watch out for. But that's
Yeah.
great. So you mentioned your team. You mentioned like us, you're a virtual business. So tell us about your team and what would you say, are the strengths and how they're supporting the business and your clients.
So we've got a team of 20, split between we have a small number of contractors, which allow us to sort of flex that sort of income reconciliation part of the business. And then we have the business split into the core components that we talked about. So we've got a fairly large team in income reconciliation where we've introduced our digital agent. So I guess one of the things that we're looking at is from a skills perspective. Skills council got involved to say, well, look at the skill set. So, taking away some of that processing requirement, we know that we can take on more clients and we can change those roles to make them more technical, more specialist, more looking at the onboarding, more looking at actually how do we embrace that client more because we've got more time to be able to do that.
Hmm.
So income reconciliation is a core part. Then we've got our projects and training team who do that digital transformation piece. We look at the way that firms are using their technology, and often it's a thin layer that they're using to say, well, how can we deepen your use so you can maximize the efficiencies? We do the process mapping, so we look at perhaps how they're running their processes currently and how we can build it into a one best way of operating and therefore save efficiencies. So the last firm we looked at and we worked with, we could save them 3.3 million to come from a mix of different processes into a single operating model. So there's some substantial savings there. And then we also help firms, select their technology. So we do RFI processes, process mapping delivers ROI. So it gives real clarity to those numbers that firms don't necessarily have. And I think that's really important so they understand, what their processes are costing them
Mm.
versus what they would cost them.
What I really like about, and that's really helpful. Thanks, Chris. I mean, what I really like about what you do is it's almost like it makes the intangible tangible, and
Yeah.
particularly the process mapping piece, and when firms can begin to see actually what are the how the workflows can be redesigned and condensed and shortened so it delivers the savings like you've mentioned, the efficiencies. That's when the light bulbs moments start to go on. And I think the other thing that we talk a lot about model office, as well as obviously your KPIs and things like that. It's cost of inaction, COI we call it. So it's the cost of inaction of not doing what you should really be doing around the in our world, the governance, risk and compliance tech space is a big one, because we know we can save them time and cost, but the only way that's going to work is by doing the hard work of
Yeah.
actually rolling up your sleeves and then doing the workflow integration and how all that works, and which is your world. But you bring that to life by that process mapping, which actually then builds in that light bulb moment, which I think is really really smart. I mean, when we're talking about tech and AI, what we talked about the kind of like the frustrations that firms are going through right now with the testing, the trialing. They are embedding some,
Yeah.
still a long way to go. What would you see the challenges and opportunities now around the AI and tech space?
So I think the challenge is for those firms that haven't jumped in yet.
Mm.
I think there's still a lot of fear factor that sits behind the scenes, and I think we have to get over that as a business. AI is going to change the shape of FS. I think the challenge is looking at those skills versus the skills that you would need. If you've got a data scientist, if you've got a business analyst, you know, have you looked at what you need in your business versus what you've currently got?
Yeah.
I always describe AI as a really bright graduate that you've brought into the business, and therefore, you have to spend time training and learning and understanding. And, we've certainly seen that with our digital agent. It's taken a huge amount of learning, and each client presents a different set of
Mm.
challenges that we have to overcome. And I think I would say to firms, you've got to be patient. You've got to have some patience. You've got to have a really clear plan, because if you don't have a plan and you're all in, and it's just not gonna work really.
Yeah.
So, but I think the opportunities are significant. I think to allow people to step into their next role, and give them more technical capability rather than, in our team, there's a lot of repetition in what they do. So we can take out the repetition and we
Hmm.
can say, right, you now become a specialist, because you can then identify those trends and things that are happening. You can talk to the clients how we can maximize more of their technology outputs. So I
Yeah.
think I think there's lots of opportunity. I still think there's a lot of change. I think there's a lot of firms out there that haven't looked at AI that really need to jump on that bandwagon and start thinking about actually what does that journey look like for them.
Yeah, really, really important points. Well made. So we do a cost of compliance report every year, and last year we really focused on key areas, right? What compliance activities are keeping you up at night, and artificial intelligence is one of the big ones. How should they deploy AI within the compliance world? Is it going to start to eat into their jobs and replace, and all? There's all that sort of fear factor going on. And you've also got what that in that sense, it's regarding what time and costs are they spending on their business, and 65% of the time is really still spent on the business, and or inside the business, should I say? And what 35% is only spent with their clients. And in an ideal world, if you process map it in the right way, it should be flipped to the other way, other way with.
Yeah.
Be interested in your views on that, actually.
Well, do you know, I think you're absolutely right. But I think the other thing that we find is that firms they'll start off with a good process.
Mm,
And then as things change in their business and regulatory things happen, they won't refine that process. They will add on and add on and add on and add on a bit more. And we saw one firm that had a 196 stage um, process, which we got down to 6 steps.
real.
And so, I call it the illuminator because it really does bring to life actually how firms are operating and
Mm,
how complex their processes have become. And we just say, look, let's just strip it all back and let's just make sure we're really clear
hmm.
in terms of what the requirements are for the business and how you have a single source of truth through your preferred, could be a practice management solution, but any tech that you have, you should refine those processes.
You should, and that reminds me. There's a there's a great report out of the States by it's called the MIT report, and it's all about AI and how it's successfully implemented by only 5% of firms. 90 odd percent of firms are just not getting it and not doing it right. And what they're
Right.
doing effectively is they're putting a nice, shiny, bright new AI on into their tech stack, where it just sits there and doesn't do much. And that's the challenge, and that's where I know you Jigsaw Tree, and the good work that you do help enormously, because what they look at it is three ways. They look at it from a human friction perspective. They talk about the fact that you need to roll up your sleeves, you need to dig into the workflows like you've just talked about, and then do the work. And so they talk about human friction, which is like resistance, fear, habits. So there's that education piece for the
Yeah.
team to go through, which I know you guys do really, really well, which is kind of like it forces buy-in, and it gets them to a stage where they're more comfortable with it, and understand that that they need to go down that route. You've also got organizational friction, which is looking at the policy, the governance, the incentive, any misalignments, and that blends into our world as well, which is on the governance, risk, and compliance side of it. And that's good because it prevents premature scaling of tech if it's not implemented properly, and that type of thing, which I know you guys do. Pilots, making sure you got the pilots set up in the right way, not
Definitely.
set up for success, not failure, right? So
Absolutely.
that's a massive one. The final one is technical friction. So that's looking at your systems, and obviously with that one, we haven't touched on it yet, but you've got the legacy stuff, right? How are you helping firms with kind of like looking at the legacy tools, because there's lots out there, and looking at adaptability and agility and flexibility in the workflows. What kind of things are you doing there?
Well, so we're looking at their tech stack as a whole,
Right.
um, to just make sure that, they understand. We went into one firm and they had 100 different technologies. And it was really clear that, there were pockets being used and some that weren't being used at all. So,
Right.
it's saying, look, let's look at that cradle to grave life cycle, which tech fits into which part, how they all integrate together to make sure that you have all of the component parts that you need
Mm,
and that you don't have three pieces of tech. We've gone into one firm and they've got, I think, three or four pieces of tech that does their cash flow,
right.
but their practice management offers it as well. So it's just saying, okay, so what element gives you which, and
Mhm.
actually which is the best piece of tech that fits in well, that delivers the functionality that you need. So it's just stripping out any technology that isn't being used, that isn't fit for purpose, that isn't integrated and doesn't allow that data to flow.
That's really good. I mean, when you're talking about tech stacks, I mean, there's no doubt about it. A lot of them are too top heavy. They haven't been kind of like thought through, and there's no fault of these firms. I mean, at the end of the day, they're out there, right, trying to do the BAU stuff, the business as usual stuff,
Yeah,
getting tech in that's going to help them. I think it's also like you've alluded to, it's the right people in the right place with the right skills. So data scientists, business analysis, you got the CTO position. You might be thinking for the bigger firms about a CAIO in the business.
right.
You know, someone who knows the way around AI is interesting, and it's one of the things that we were. I mean, we've just launched our training and competence dashboards, and we've also launched um, our client file review automation verification checks. And just looking at the workflows there on the verification checks, we've kind of looked at reducing the manual processes and the Excel spreadsheet processes, which is our biggest competitor, by the way, Excel spreadsheets,
Right.
not necessarily tech. But the key issue with that is that we've kind of like cut it in half. So it was about 10 workflow steps that we've kind of like got that down. Well, we've actually got it to four, so it's more than half.
Brilliant.
So but that's the type of process. But it's a case of, I think, making sure that you're taking your clients with you on that journey and not losing them on the way,
And
which is
I think you're absolutely right. We bring firms into a workshop, and when
right.
they see the process mapping and it's very pictorial, and as you're mapping that process, they can begin to see, okay, yeah, we can see where some of the challenges are. And you've already got them bought in because they're involved in the workshop. And so like you, I think that is just so important to be able to re-engineer the business is to have the right people in the room.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. Okay, so coming to the end of our short time together, we always ask a kind of like a number of blow the doors off questions, I call them, just to kind of get to know
Okay.
you as well as possible in the time that we've got together, Chris. So, first one is, and again, obviously it's up to you what you like to share and so forth, but tell us one thing about you that others don't necessarily know and that you're willing to share.
Okay. Um, I used to be more of an adrenaline junkie than I am today. So I've done a bungee jump, I've done a skydive, and I've done an abseil, all for charity.
Brilliant.
Um, but after I had a horse riding accident, as you know, back in
Yeah.
September, so there will be less of those things happening in the future, shall we say?
Great. So what do you do for your rushes now then, Chris?
Well, I'm just thinking about that. I will be getting back on a horse.
Good.
Um, so I'm just thinking about actually what should I be doing? Because I used to love cycling. So whether I do some cycling activity, I did the velo, which was 100 miles in a day. That was great. That was a real buzz doing that. So I'll definitely be thinking through what I should be doing this year.
Sounds good. And second one is, if you could change one thing about the sector in which we operate, what would it be?
I think wider perception about our sector, when you look at some of the soaps and they'll have a crook and the crook will be a financial advisor or and I just think,
Yeah.
this sector is highly professional, highly regulated, really, high levels of qualification. And I think sometimes our wider market that we should be operating in don't necessarily see that. And that would be the one thing, the wider market perception change.
Yeah, 100% here on that one. I mean, it's massively undervalued in what it does. The financial planner and advice profession and it is a profession,
Definitely.
considering, I mean, I used to be a financial advisor, right? So, the amount of, qualifications that you need and expertise that you need. And then there's the whole behavioral stuff, which is the soft skill, which is an art form in its own right. Finally, where would you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Hopefully, sipping a cocktail somewhere lovely.
Nice. Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. Hopefully hot with a nice beach.
Absolutely. But, doing some more charity work. I
Yeah.
love animals. I'm part of the Royal Society of Veterinary Surgeons from a public advisory board. So
Oh,
we
great.
give input and advice into that. So animals are definitely my passion. So doing more work around that, I think, would be great as the
That's
business
fantastic.
becomes more automated. Those things are easier to do.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, look, Chris, great having you on board. And thank you so much for taking some time out because I know you're busy and you're guesting. And we wish you and
Very
Jigsaw Tree and the
welcome.
team all the very best.
Thank you very much, Chris. And it's been great, spending a bit of time with you too and understanding a bit more about Model Office.